Okay, hello everyone. You're listening to Pixel Project Radio, the video game discussions and analysis podcast. My name is Rick. I'm your maestro for the evening. Today we're talking all about the music of Yasunori Mitsuda. We did this once before. We did this with Nobuo Uematsu. We're going all through the Gooch's team. Before we get into that, up top, as always, I'm thanking the patrons. The patrons are my loyal orchestral assistants, librarians, and concert maestro, and they keep this orchestra in tune. Just go with it. If you want to be like these fine section players, you can head over to patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. See what we have on offer there. You can join the free Discord, check out the patron bonus episodes and voting, all of that fun stuff. We've actually got several patron-chosen episodes coming up here, a couple in a row, with Final Fantasy IV and Earthbound as we move forward. That'll be fun. Speaking of JRPGs, we're talking about Mitsuda. Speaking of we, co-host joining me once again on the show, Nick from the Friday Night Gamecast, Nikolai, young Nick. He's known by many names in the streets. How's it going, Nick?
Young Nikolai the Fell Omen in the PPR Discord server. Gotta plug that. It's a beautiful place over there. So I'm really happy to be here, Rick. Thank you. I'm excited to talk about Yasunori Mitsuda, and I'm excited to be back on Pixel Project Radio. So again, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
If you're new to the show, we are straying from our usual format. And by the way, we're glad that you're here, of course. We're straying from the usual format to do an episode on the music of Mitsuda. We like to do these adjacent episodes from time to time. We had just finished up Chrono. That was a game that sort of took over my life for a month as I played through it twice and played through Chrono Trigger again and played through part of Radical Dreamers. Loads of fun. Amazing series of games. So I said, let's do the music of Mitsuda, very different from Uematsu, and that's what we're talking about today. So, Nick, the first Mitsuda game that you ever played, do you happen to remember what that was? Because I know what mine was, and it is not what anybody is going to expect to hear.
Yeah, 100% it was Xenosaga. That was the first time that I had listened to his work, and it's funny because that's kind of one of the ones that he himself looks back on as being kind of like the one that's not really representative of his style. But I really love the Xenosaga soundtrack. I think it's something that's like super unique and really stands out amongst the rest of his work as being like something that attaches to the property of Xenosaga, or just like the aspects of that game in itself. So yeah, that was the first time I heard it. But then of course, I've recently jumped into Chrono Trigger, so I'm really kind of locked in on Mitsuda from this point on.
Oh yeah, you've got so much of his catalog to still go through, that of just quality music, quality JRPGs. Oh, everybody is envious of you.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm just, the thing about it is, for so long I've been really locked in, and I think part of this is because of my personal bias. I generally tend towards playing modern games, and so I do enjoy a lot of like more of the modern composers that are currently out there, and like Shoji Meguro, or some of the works that we'll hear on like the modern Final Fantasy soundtracks. But I think that part of the excitement for me going back, and that's something that I really got to thank you for, Rick, is igniting that excitement and just discovering these games that came out in the era of the Xenogears, Xenosaga, the beginning of the Chrono series. I really find it to be works that are super timeless, and even I've spent I haven't even done, and this because we've discussed it offline, but I've even gone in and done like a couple of hours of Chrono Trigger at this point for the very first time. A weird game. I feel like nobody knows about it. I'm sure there's only hundreds of us that's actually play the game and know about it out there, but it's one I would definitely recommend. It only being a few hours in there. I feel like people need to know about this game more because it's so good.
Chrono Trigger? You said?
Yeah, exactly. Chrono Trigger. Look it up. It's a really it's a hidden gem, as you said.
Got it. Well, there you go, everybody. Check out Chrono Trigger. I'm sure it's one of it's an indie game, right? An uwu, cozy, comfy indie game?
Yeah, exactly. Pixel art, uwu, cozy game.
Composed by themes of burnout and trauma and mental health.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't want to be mean. I'm already I'm already getting mean. Okay. Chrono Trigger. Yes, that is Chrono Trigger is a phenomenal game. Phenomenal game. I don't stand by a lot of my criticisms that I put forward on the show. I was just trying to be unique and hip back then.
Now, I do need to ask, and this is my ignorance because I haven't listened to all of your work, Rick, but you've covered Chrono Trigger already on the show?
Yes. Yeah. A couple years ago.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, fantastic.
Xenosaga, well, I did play Xenosaga in middle school and early high school. I didn't get it, but I loved it. I loved the animation. I loved the characters, but I didn't understand the story very much at all. I did play that. The first game I played by Mitsuda that I knew was Mitsuda was Xenogears, but that was all the way in like 2022 or 2023. But the first game that I ever played where Mitsuda was the composer, or was credited as the composer, more on that in a second, was Mario Party, the first Mario Party. That was Yasunori Mitsuda. And I bet a lot of people did not know that.
That's insane. That's actually crazy because... I feel like he's maybe the master of rage bait now. He's like the rage bait composer, as it were, for creating such a controversial series or being credited to write music for such a beloved series that makes people hate their friends.
I don't think he did any other entries in the series moving forward, but he definitely did one. I think he worked with two other folks, but only he was credited. I'll have to jump in with an edit whenever I find that. But yes, he did, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But before we do, let's talk about what this episode is and what it is not. So this episode is not going to be a comprehensive, holistic look at Yasunori Mitsuda's biography or his work, his catalog. There are simply too many games, too many animes, too many things that he's done for us to go through and pick everything. And Nick and I did go through, and we picked a bunch of stuff. And we worked together, and by the end, we had like 25 plus works, and we were like, okay, we need to cut this down. And even cutting it down was difficult. So now we might even pare it down further on mic as we go, depending on how time goes. So there is going to be a lot of stuff left out that is quality, a lot of stuff left out that is just some of your favorites, some of my favorites. We're doing our best. That's all I'm saying. We're going to touch on a lot of good stuff, though. And I did make sure to include stuff that is not commonly talked about, although it is front-loaded with Chrono material, because we had just covered that, and I'm still very excited. So what it also is, I hope, an extending of an invitation over to all of you to continue this conversation with us in the Discord, on the social medias. I say this all the time. I hope to engage all of you in the server and in social medias. It is an open invitation. You are more than welcome to come in and join us. It is free to do. It is also free to join Blue Sky and free to follow us. A little known fact, actually, that they don't want you to know. This is the only gaming podcast, pixelprojectradio is, to cure the depression from post-era Stephen Colbert.
That's right.
It's the only one.
Confirmed.
R.I.P. Stephen. He's not dead. R.I.P. The Late Show, though.
Yeah. I heard he's throwing chairs off of roofs now, so that's exciting.
Community forum. We generally do open community forum up for these kinds of things, and that was the original intent. But as I mentioned earlier, Nick and I just picked so many things that we were really interested to talk about. We had so many. Adding community forum picks would have just been extremely too much. So we did have to cut some of those. I'm keeping that thread up, though. Folks mentioned some really good music. The world map to Chrono Cross was used. Well, one of the world map themes for Chrono Cross, which I think I used for the intro for this episode. A Xenogears album, Cried, I think it would be pronounced, Cried. A lot of good stuff suggested in there, and I recommend checking it out. So, let's do some brief talking about Mitsuda the man. Nick, are you familiar? You had never played Chrono Trigger, so you might not be. Have you heard the infamous Mitsuda story about Chrono Trigger?
Yeah, this is something that I think Chris Copleen from the Retro Hangover podcast clued me into, and I did a little bit of digging. and then also some preparation for our conversation today on Mitsuda. And I realized that, he's a little bit prone to ailment, and it sounded like it was a really, really drastic situation where he got so stressed out from the pressure of having to compose for Chrono Trigger, which was his first big project that the Gooch assigned to him, that he gave himself stomach ulcers and ended up in the hospital. And so Nobuo Uematsu had to step in and really help him kind of get just over the finish line. It was a really interesting story.
Yeah, that about sums it up, too. He gave an ultimatum, essentially, at one point when he was working at Square when he first joined. He was working in sound design. Like, he was on FF5, I'm pretty sure. Maybe 4, I don't quite remember, but definitely 5, and I think 6. But as a sound designer, working on sound effects. The sound teams in any of these given works, games, films, what have you, the sound team is going to be huge, and it's so much more than just composing, which is what he wanted to do. He didn't want to work on, the sound effects of the footsteps or getting hit or doors opening, stuff like that.
Right.
Important stuff, but he didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so as you said, he gave an ultimatum. He saw that Chrono Trigger was open as a job. I think it was originally going to go to Ito and Uematsu, but Mitsuda said to Sakaguchi, "Hey, if you don't let me do this, I quit." Which, as a junior amongst the rest of his staff, that
kind of
is
crazy,
ballsy. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about this too is that it was really funny, the context of his application. It almost seemed like he won his job at Square as kind of like it was kind of like a fluke. It was something that his instructor during his music training, his music school, had said, "Hey, we're going to get you a job at an actual company on his birthday." And so he sent in his resume, and then Nobuo Uematsu wanted to hear a little more of his work. And apparently, I remember reading in the interview that he had an interview like trying to apply for the position over at Square, and they were like, do you see yourself doing this for the rest of your life? And he was like, this is paraphrasing, but he was basically saying to the effect of, "Oh, this seems like a good, career stepping stone, something to get me on to the next thing," which is actually hilarious when you're working with like one of the best ever, Nobuo Uematsu. So, and he's got a really great personality about it too, because he was saying just in retrospect, like, "Oh, they probably thought this guy was some weirdo," which is really funny.
Yeah, he's a good-humored guy. All of the quotes that I pulled, which, by the way, all of these interviews, there are about 3 or 4 of them. I'll put in the episode description. I'll link them. They're just filled with little indications of him laughing between responses. So he's just a jovial guy.
He's got a good sense of humor, yeah.
That, especially in Japan in that period of time. Like, I know even today, Japan's work culture is much different than America's, obviously. But to walk into a prestigious, Square was maybe not as prestigious as they are today, but to walk into an established company and with veterans and be asked, we want to invite you to our team. Like, do you see yourself doing this whole time? And he goes, "No, not really." I don't know. I think it's a bit refreshing, but I could also see how it might have been interpreted as maybe a little too juvenile or maybe even disrespectful, depending on who's in the room. I don't know. He was born, Mitsuda was, back in January of 72. That makes him 54 today, excuse me. At first, he did not take music all that seriously. It wasn't until his pops got him a PC in like high school that he started getting back into it. He had played piano before, and at the time, PCs were, not as ubiquitous as they are today. That was a big ticket item. So getting that got him back into learning computers, got him into learning computers, got him back into doing little music things on the computers. And it eventually led him to attending the Tokyo Junior College of Music, which I saw in various places get labeled something, like not top tier. And I didn't really know how to take that.
Really? So it wasn't like the best one. Interesting.
Maybe not at that time. I do not want to cast aspersions to the good people at the TJCM.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because it sounded like he had a a very interesting relationship with his professors over at the Tokyo Junior College. I remember reading it as a part of like, his conversation of, what the kind of person he is in the fire that was lit in him. I remember him talking about attending a conference with his professor, and he was like, yeah, my professor really made a fool of me and a bunch of other music teachers that were assembled at this like convention. And he was referring to Yasunori Mitsuda, saying, oh, don't worry about him, he's just a second year student, he's gonna be a nobody. And everybody was laughing and stuff, and it was something that like it locked it, a crystallized moment in his memory apparently, that just really spurred him on to try and do great things later on.
Yeah. I think he said that he uses moments like that as sort of fuel to keep going, to sort of succeed out of spite. I'll show you kind of thing.
Yeah.
He did get a lot of that experience at his, in collaboration and in cooperation with his professors. My understanding too is that he did a lot of gig work as well, basically unpaid labor, to move equipment to and from gigs, drum stands, keyboards, I'm sure, sound bars, sound equipment, PAs. Truly laborious and horrible work, unpaid too.
Yeah, that's tough. Is that typical for people in a graduate position in college, or is that just kind of like sometimes you got to do what you got to do to make a name for yourself?
Well, graduate positions, no. I mean, if there's like a TA contract involved, then no, you're definitely going to get paid, but I don't want to speak for the sound engineering side of it, or like the gigging side with like jazz musicians and stuff. I didn't have to do it. I mean, none of us ever had a problem if we were traveling to and from gigs and folks had equipment. We would always just help. It's not a big deal. But then also too, you get into some of the bigger, nicer gigs where the venue has a decorator, and by contract they have to be the ones to set up and tear down. And if you try to help, it can become a big problem for them.
Okay. That makes sense.
That happens all the time, like in big venues, whether it's music or not. Like if there's a decorator involved, it's like, no, by contract we have to do this shit, and whether you love it or hate it, that sucks. It doesn't affect my paycheck, but you can't get involved.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I never ran into anything like that though, but it seems like Mitsuda did. Now here's something that I found. I had never known this before. Just hearing this sort of had me thinking so many thoughts of what if, and this kind of is going to gently segue into what his music is like. You had mentioned before that, at first he didn't see his future there, right? He said that he hadn't planned on working in games. He had said in a quote that by January of my second year at the junior college, I still hadn't decided on anything. I had talked about going to work over at Joe Hisaishi's place, but I had heard that working as a sound engineer was very demanding and didn't leave a lot of time for one's own compositional aspirations. So I ultimately turned the offer down. And then he goes on to say that, he had no credentials. So like nobody was going to hire him, no credentials, no work experience. This is crazy to me. Just imagining what it would have been like for Mitsuda to have been tutored and work under the wing of Joe Hisaishi. For folks that don't know, if you've played Ni no Kuni, you've heard his work. And if you've watched Studio Ghibli films, many of those films are by Joe Hisaishi. Not to mention he does his own composing and performing as well. Fantastic composer. I can't imagine. It's nothing against Mitsuda's work now. I love his work now, but his growth would have gone off in a different direction exponentially, I imagine, getting to work that closely with one of the greater Japanese living composers.
And that's something that, he kind of admits later on in different interviews, talking about how he's the kind of person that's easily influenced. And reading this as well, I can only agree with you. I was just floored when I read, oh yeah, I got an offer to work at just the regular Joe Hisaishi's place, like one of the best of all time, no big deal. But I decided it was too much work, so I'll go work for Square, as kind of just like the backup idea, which is just so so funny in terms of his approach to life and how, he does work. But man, I love all of I haven't actually had as any experience touching the Ni no Kuni games, although I know that there's a lot of people that enjoy them. But of course, I'm a huge fan of all of Studio Ghibli and the movies that they've produced. And I can only agree with you to the extent of I can only imagine how different his work would have been. And this was another question that I had for you, and something that maybe we've talked about before offline as well, but it's something that struck me as kind of like curious, because that's the part of the music world that I don't have as much touch on. But when he says I had the chance to go work at Joe's studio, I was like, but isn't Joe Hisaishi a solo composer? Does he actually even need to work with people? Is that common? But then I think of like Atlas or Capcom Sound Team, and like I'm sure there's probably like dozens and dozens of people working as sound engineers and composers and music supervisors, and I as a layman don't understand the differentiator between all of these different roles. But this was just something that's very curious to me, so I didn't know how you thought about that. But yeah, that's amazing.
Well, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. It might be that Hisaishi just owns a studio and runs it in tandem with being a composer, because the thing is there are very exceedingly few composers that make their full-time income composing. Most of them are most of them are also teaching in some aspect. They might be performing in some aspect. Oh goodness, let's see. Chen Yi is the first composer that came to mind. She is a Chinese composer, and she was on faculty at UMKC as this distinguished professor that was teaching there. She taught composition students. She is a major composer. Jennifer Higdon is another one. She does various teaching positions, is always lecturing, stuff like that. Caroline Shaw is my favorite contemporary composer. I know she's a teacher. She's a performer with Roomful of Teeth as well as a couple of other factions. It's just, I wouldn't be surprised if Hisaishi also had a studio, especially if he's recording his works frequently enough to warrant one. And if that's the case, then yeah, like his team is going to need to have engineers, which I don't know if this is an uncommon opinion, but the good sound engineers that I've worked with over the years, generally, I mean, Mitsuda's right. They generally don't do like quote unquote do music full time. Like they're not gigging, they're not composing, they're not teaching. They do sound engineering, but they also have the best ears out of anybody I've ever met. And it's kind of insane because like they don't always speak the language that you do. Like they're not going to call out like, well, this is the third of the chord needs to be a bit flat by about 15 cents, 13 cents, somewhere around there. And that fifth's it's too in tune. It needs to be a sharp by about 2 cents. They're not going to speak the language like that, but they will hear every single shift in tone and tune. It is wild. It is the craziest thing ever. Not to mention there's the whole technology aspect and miking, mixing, mastering. That he's right. Mitsuda's right. That is a hard job. That is so hard.
Yeah, that's so interesting too, because in my mind too, I feel like, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I almost feel like when I think about music composers, when you reach that level of responsibility in that type of work, in that line of profession, it's always like my assumption is that you have to know how to do all the jobs. You have to know how to do editing and sound engineering, or at least have like touching points on how all of those aspects of like working on a sound team kind of comes together. So it's not surprising with Mitsuda specifically that he came in there and he's like, he has these different options that are in front of him. So instead he chooses to try and go with something a little bit more creative at Square, which I find to be fascinating.
Yeah, I think especially if you're lesser known or less successful, quote unquote, than somebody like Mitsuda, it's definitely beneficial to know the basics of all of this. It's not dissimilar to podcasting in that way. Let's bring it back to something that you and I can both understand, podcasting. Like folks like us, we are familiar with the DAWs, the digital audio workstations. We edit our own audio. We're familiar with miking. Whereas if we had the pleasure to sit down with, let's say, Josh Clark and Chuck Bryant of Stuff You Should Know, one of the biggest podcasts for the past like 2 decades. They're at where are they at? iHeartMedia. Like they don't edit their own episodes, so I wouldn't be surprised if they don't know how to, do any audio editing or necessarily what the differences between XLR and USB mics are, like aside from the cable, and that's fine because they have a full-time editor and that's what they're there for. Yeah, I think it's good if you can learn how to do a lot of that basic stuff, it will only help you.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's talk a little bit about Mitsuda's music, though. We're gonna start transitioning into the actual selected works, but I had a few quotes here that I thought would be cool to touch on as we move forward. So one of the interviews that I found was translated by Shmuplations back in, this was done in 2003. The question was pitched to him: your music in Xenogears and other games has garnered you a devoted following. What things are important to you personally when you compose? And I loved this answer so much. Here's what Mitsuda says. He said, quote, "I try to hold myself to a standard. Would someone want to spend money to hear this song? Because no matter how much you may love a piece of music yourself, it's important how others will see it." That's point one. I always ask myself that, and it's frequently on my mind. I have to say it's almost like I have a split personality. I try to maintain both a clinical, objective side and a passionate side, the listener and the creator. I try to embody both aspects. That said, when I'm in the very moment of creation, there is only the passionate, enthusiastic version of me. He goes on, end quote, he goes on to sort of expand on this in a separate answer to a separate question. He continues, "I'm also the type of composer who can't write the music until I get my headspace into the world of the game and feel that I really understand it. With games, maybe 50% is decided by the initial script and story, but at 50%, I don't feel like I understand things. Like a novel, until we get to the end phase, my mind doesn't feel like it's a real world, and I hate working on things in a fractured, piecemeal fashion." End quote.
Yeah.
I love so many things about that answer. And I think it does a great job of showing how different of a mindset he has compared to Uematsu, for example. Uematsu is going to be a continual comparison, not because I think we should, quote unquote, compare them, but because they're both very, very successful in JRPGs. They are easily two of the maybe 4 or 5 most well-known and well-cited game composers, I think.
Yeah.
And we also did Uematsu on the show, so it'll be a little familiar to folks. But Uematsu is much more, at least this is how I interpret his music, much more song-oriented. And it comes from, his background. He loved Elton John. He loved, was it the Beach Boys? I'm almost certain he cited Pet Sounds, which is an all-time great album. But he was a prog rock guy. The Black Mages and the Earthbound Papas. Songs are part of what revs his engine. Mitsuda seems to be more studied and comprehensive. Mitsuda needs to be in the thick of everything and to be totally immersed. Speaking of bands, actually, and speaking of Uematsu, I read somewhere today that he compared Mitsuda's music, Uematsu did, to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, which led me to a bunch of listening and posting in our in the Discord server today. And yeah, man, you can totally hear it. I can hear it.
That is really cool. And the thing here too is that, for someone like me getting that peek inside of Mitsuda's head, this is really interesting, kind of like that the split in his analytical and kind of passionate side of his approach towards music. And I generally feel that you can, the way that people are, the way that composers are, you can genuinely feel that in the types of songs that they're actually able to produce. And I do feel that in a lot of Mitsuda's work. I think that his touching points on all of these different genres that have influenced him and inspired him in the type of music that he creates are one of the more interesting things I think about him as a composer, and one of the more interesting things that create this kind of separation between, okay, this is a Mitsuda work versus this is a Nobuo Uematsu work, especially because they were making or they were working on games around the same era, around that same time. I think one of the interesting things too, that, and this is kind of a callback to the Chrono Trigger history of like the making of, is, when Mitsuda got sick, he had to go to the hospital. And he couldn't work on any more of the music, or he of course, he just wasn't in the studio. He wasn't on site. So he wasn't able to actually complete it, and Nobuo Uematsu stepped in. But whenever he got better and came back to the studio, the game was already out. It was, they were selling copies and everything. And this was just so fascinating and just sweet to me, because apparently Uematsu left a letter on Mitsuda's desk saying, congratulations on your first full release for the game that you've done. You did an excellent job. By the way, P.S. I can never replicate your style, which is just so funny to me. And that prompted me to go and listen to the works that were credited to Uematsu. And they're just so remarkably different from the ones that Uematsu, or rather Mitsuda, had created earlier prior to his illness. So yeah, it's really funny seeing that and seeing kind of that separation in the approach to styles, and it's obviously evident here, as in what he's saying, that he approaches his music composition.
Yeah, I think I read that same interview, and it's funny reading if I were Mitsuda and I read the first part of that, I might interpret it as just a canned sort of corporate response, like, hey, congrats on your first finished work, you finally made it, your hard work paid off. It's like, okay, yeah. But then hearing at the end, hey, by the way, I can't do what you do. What an incredible compliment.
That's got to feel great as a junior composer, right?
Oh yeah, and you're right. You listen to the first time I heard in Chrono Trigger, I don't remember the name, but it's the 12-bar blues, old school rock and roll thing when you're racing Johnny, the speed biker. The Johnny. It's the first thing I thought was, oh yeah, that's Uematsu. And it was. It was, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so proggy. It's immediately evident by his work. Yeah.
But it's very clear that Mitsuda takes a considered, almost cerebral and laser-focused approach to creating this stuff. He doesn't take it lightly. He wants to give his entire self to every project he does. And this comes up in a few of his later interviews as well that I think I have sprinkled throughout the rest of here. I also love what he said, too, about maintaining both, what did he say, the clinical side and the passionate side, the listener and the creator.
Yeah.
I think that's advice that's very romanticized, right? To always, write for yourself and podcast for yourself and do whatever for yourself. And that's fine. I think that's important. But if you are putting it in front of other people, in some ways it's a little irresponsible at worst to not consider them. But also,
right.
I mean, practically too, if you're trying to make a living, I mean, you have to, right?
Yeah. And another thing too is that obviously there's the approach of trying to consider the audience, the audience, and that's something that I do, again, to bring it back to podcasting, something we know. I genuinely do a lot of the times when I'm preparing notes or I'm preparing in my head thoughts on, games that we're discussing or things that I'm doing. I'm thinking about, okay, is this actually interesting to me, or is this going to be interesting to the audience? So I try to take that approach, and it's interesting that, of course, this is something that's shared by a lot of people who really take their work very seriously. One thing I did want to ask you, Rick, and something that I hope is not too off topic, but something that really struck me is he said that he doesn't like working in a fractured way, and he doesn't like working in a game where he doesn't understand the scope or the meaning of what's actually happening, which is really interesting to me, because my question is that when is a composer actually brought in to work on a game, or does this just depend on the studio? Because for him, I understand that, and this is something we'll touch on Xenosaga later, he wrote all of the music based off of the scenes that he was watching in the story, and he goes back and he thinks that, of course, this is very stiff, but something that I'm just curious of is that, do you agree, as someone who's involved in music composition yourself, is it really tough to write music for a project or a piece where you don't have a comprehensive understanding of the art that's involved?
Well, first, I'm not a composer. I'm not involved in music composition.
Sorry, I thought my fault. Sorry.
No. It's fine. I don't think I'm creative enough to do composing, to do writing of any kind. I just don't think that I have that ability. Anyway.
Okay.
I think you're right. It depends largely on the studio and the composer and the teams. I feel like I hear more often than not that the composers are shown, what the game is, or at least given an outline of the story, the characters, etc. because otherwise they're just pitching random material and it may or may not be appropriate. I think Xenosaga, what he did with Xenosaga, working to fit his music and compose his music around the cutscenes and around the staging and the blocking, that's more akin to like musical theater and film than it is to video games by far. Which is why, I mean, he says somewhere later in some quote that in that way, that soundtrack is sort of the most complete, or maybe perfect is the word that was translated into English.
Yeah.
I can see why. It does fit together. I mean, that's why in some ways Xenosaga feels so much more like a production than something like Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger, and that's not a value judgment, by the way. Chrono Trigger feels like a video game. Xenosaga feels like a production of sorts. Again, no value judgments, but it's just different approaches. And of course, different technological constraints or lack thereof too.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the music. When you're listening to Mitsuda's music, what are some of the key traits you hear in what he's doing? I have written down a couple of salient characteristics, but I want to ask you, like, what do you hear, especially as somebody that hasn't played his games and doesn't necessarily know what's going on in the story? Like, what do you hear in Mitsuda, just in general?
Yeah, so in general, and using very non-specific, musical terms, I genuinely do feel like Mitsuda's level of comprehensive, like, emotional bandwidth is really, really available in a lot of his works, a lot of the tracks that I've listened to. This was something that immediately struck me during Xenosaga, and in preparing for the show, and kind of reviewing his work on Trigger as well as Chrono Cross. Something that really strikes me about a lot of these works that kind of carries a through line is that he's using a lot of different instruments, and he's sampling a lot of music that's kind of inspired by like this kind of folk world music feeling, but also at the same time, a lot of my favorite tracks of his, and a lot of tracks we'll discuss today, is just there is a level of like sadness, and there's a level of kind of wistfulness that I feel in his music that just really, really is just genuinely kind of present in a lot of the work, and it's something that I myself really enjoy attaching to and kind of like hanging on to just experience and live in that world with him.
Yeah, the world music aspect is a big one, specifically Celtic music. And forgive me if I'm like Celtic versus Scottish. I admit I don't 100% know where those lines are drawn, but I've seen Celtic used to describe it. But that's in a lot of his earlier music too, and so much so that he did a whole album of it later. Just not a video game thing, just nothing but these sort of Celtic traditions. Yeah, I put it into our notes and linked it about 10 minutes before we got got on the horn.
Okay.
We can talk about it a little bit later, but very, very, it's a big part of his influence. Speaking of influence, just if you're curious, some of the other bands and artists he was interested in, he heard a lot of Art Blakey whenever he was a kid from his dad. Jazz drummer Art Blakey and the Messengers, Monin, the original Monin, also the Carpenters, which might make you think he was a drummer. He's not. He's a pianist. Also, composition-wise, big fan of Ravel and Tchaikovsky. I can definitely hear some Tchaikovsky a little bit. Not so much Ravel, but definitely Tchaikovsky.
Yeah, not so much Ravel.
And, oh yeah? What's your favorite Ravel work, Nick?
I really, really liked, is it Bolero? I mean, obviously, I think that's probably like one of his most famous, right? But he's a Spanish composer, isn't he?
Yeah, that was good-natured ribbing. I just didn't expect you of all people to go like, oh yeah, that composer. Mm-hmm, yeah, I know him. Ravel, here's a fun fact for you. If you want to hear something really good by Ravel, two things, both piano. One was the first like super duper challenging pianist work that anybody ever showed me. Gaspard de la Nuit. I'm pretty sure that's by Ravel. Okay. Very cool. He's also got a concerto for left hand only on piano. which was commissioned by a pianist back in I want to say the early 1900s maybe, that only had use of his one arm. And so he only played left hand, and it is a concerto for left hand. Folks love it. It is an incredible work. It's a very important work. Ravel, yeah, great stuff. And then, of course, Le Tombeau, incredible piece of music. Yeah, he's a great composer. He hated bolero, actually. He gave some quotes saying that it was just like basically just nothing more than an exercise. he hated it.
That's so funny.
Yeah. There was a band. I didn't want to leave out the band. Oh no, techno. Techno was the other thing.
Yeah, the techno music that he listened to, which is really funny to think about, like, you know, young Yasunori Mitsuda just in the club in Japan in like the late 80s, early 90s, just vibing out to techno. That's just really what flashed through my mind. And I'm like, it's not present at all, I feel like, in a lot of his works, unless you look at some of the more funky soundtracks and or rather scores.
And there is
Chrono
one.
Cross.
There is one today from Shadow Hearts that we're going to talk about.
Oh, okay, that's exciting.
Yeah. and hey, whomst among us does not want to be a young Japanese guy in the 90s in a techno club?
Oh my God, forget about it.
I can't say that that's not me.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
You know, isn't that where the vaporwave aesthetic came from, of like, you know, VHS filters on Japanese anime guys smoking in the rain? Isn't that what that's all about?
It's gotta be where that came from.
I agree with a lot of what you were saying, though, and something that you touched on sort of is his penchant and predilection toward writing with character. This is something that we talked about in Uematsu's episode as well, and something that I hear with him. But there is a distinct line between his music and Mitsuda's, wherein I'm going to use this word, and I don't mean it as a value judgment, because I genuinely, in most cases, do not think that the quote-unquote better argument is productive in any way. Which I was reading a lot of those. Who's the better composer this morning? And it pissed me off. But Mitsuda's music strikes me as more mature than Uematsu's. I mean, Uematsu writes songs a lot of the time, and he's very, very good at it. He is so good at writing a catchy melody, drawing those influences from Elton John, from prog rock into video game music naturally in a way that doesn't sound forced. That is a huge thing. Mitsuda doesn't do that as much, but Mitsuda's music does feel a bit more studied and a bit more, I don't want to say intellectual, but it sounds a little older, let's say. All of this sounds like I'm judging it to be better, and I swear I'm not. When Mitsuda writes in character, that's character like an emotion, affect, A-F-F-E-C-T, he writes a lot of music that conveys complex feelings. Not that Uematsu doesn't, because he does. And I know I'm going to be listening to this and when I'm editing, and be simultaneously pissed that I'm giving so many caveats and explanations, and also feel like I'm still somehow misspeaking. But I mean, you know the internet. They hear you say one thing, they don't listen, they flame you. But Mitsuda, Uematsu, like ukulele to Chocobo, not a great example. Vivi's theme, I'm thinking of Vivi's theme. I'm thinking of Steiner's theme. I'm thinking of Tifa's theme.
Yeah, Tifa's
I'm thinking
theme.
of Zozo, the town of Zozo's theme. These all convey those characters and places very well. But if I compare it to something like Bound by Fate from Chrono Cross, or Frog's theme is not the best example, but you could use it, or Shion's Crisis, and a lot of the Shion motifs in Xenosaga.
Yeah, the Shion motifs were really, really quite well done.
It's the emotions feel a little bit more complex, and like they're composed of more gradients than most of what Uematsu's done. When Uematsu does that stuff, it's very clear that he can do it, and he can do it well. It just seems like the stuff that he loves doing is more akin to some of the stuff that Mitsuda does, just not as often, like the celebratory characters, the very quirky sort of things, like Dancing with Lizards from Cross, or Termina, or the Millennium Fair.
Yeah, the Millennium Fair.
Millennial Fair. Nobody wants to go there.
She's full of a bunch of Nicks and Ricks just walking around and cheersing on IPAs. One of the things that I think is interesting about like the comparison between the two, and you talk about like obviously the maturity and kind of the composure that, you know, and I don't mean a pun there, but it just kind of like the level of the level of kind of just age timelessness that Mitsuda is able to carry through his work is really interesting to me as well, especially in light of like how he is quoted as saying that, you know, he thinks so much about the audience and how the audience is going to receive. When I think about Uematsu's work, especially some of the earlier Final Fantasy works, it almost, and even, you know, some of the later works, you know, from 9, 10, you know, and onwards that he was involved in. I know he isn't involved in a lot after 10, but for like the work that he has done, it does genuinely feel like he knew that like there was a diverse audience of people that were playing the game, but it almost feels to the extent like Uematsu's work was almost composed with like kids in mind, whereas a lot of like in contrast, a lot of Yasunori Mitsuda's compositions genuinely do feel like he is writing, you know, compositions for film or for movies that are going to be enjoyed by adult audiences. And of course, the people who played these games when they were young are now going back and playing them today, and we are adults. So maybe this is just my own personal lens or bias, but I know I definitely connect with both of these composers in their works, but Mitsuda's work just genuinely resonates with me.
I think I know what you're getting at, but I think I might say it's not so much that it's your and my biases that are contributing to that interpretation, so much as it is that the work that they both do, and others, Shoji Meguro, as you said, Shimomura, my favorite.
Yeah.
At least at the time of recording this, my favorite.
Yeah.
Countless others not in video games. I think it's just a mark of their music being mature. It's like it's like I was just talking about this with Kena. One of my biggest problems with Kena is, for all its comparisons to Pixar, Kena fundamentally doesn't have a complex story with a lot to say. It's very surface level. Whereas Pixar, you rewatch a lot of those Pixar films that we watched as children, and you are picking up on layers of messaging that is not only just appropriate for children, but it is appropriate, perhaps sometimes even more so, for adults as well. It's that sort of humanistic and humanly centered, evergreen, ever-present sort of messaging that's in those films that makes them so special. And I think that's part of what makes this collective of composers' works so special as well. Mitsuda and Uematsu, certainly. We can listen to something like Aiko's theme from Final Fantasy IX for Uematsu is a classic example of a theme that I hated as a kid because, it's just girly flutes. But as an adult, it's like, no, there is a sadness there, and it is indicated by like one harmony change, and suddenly it recolors the whole thing. Same too with one of the first pieces we're going to be talking about here in a few minutes, Wind Scene from Chrono Trigger. Speaking of, let's move forward into the works. There are some other salient characteristics of Mitsuda, but I think we can talk about those as we go. The way this was going to work, the way that Nick and I structured the rest of this episode, we broke it down into a couple of different games. As we said before, we had a shitload, if you'll pardon the technical podcasting term, of music that we had written down. So we cut it down further, and now we might cut it down even more depending on how the conversation goes. Or we might not, just totally depends. We might miss some of your favorites, and I apologize. I wanted to get to some Xenoblade stuff, but there's none of that here. We've got the Chronos up top, and then we've got some extra stuff at the end. Not video, well, some not video game, some not JRPG. That is probably going to be how the timestamps will be. We'll just show the different works, so you can skip around if you'd like. But why don't we go ahead and start with Chrono Trigger?
Let's do it.
Here's an interesting little tidbit. In one of these interviews, I don't remember which one, he was asked about his feelings about the Chrono Trigger soundtrack because he had called it in the past immature. Mitsuda did. And here's what Mitsuda said. He said, quote, "In my opinion, my compositions in Chrono Trigger are in fact very immature. But taking aspects of the game such as graphics, scenario, sound, and music, the game was very well balanced, which is the primary reason why the music has probably remained in the hearts of players. Ask a person who has never played Chrono Trigger for their opinions on the soundtrack, and they probably wouldn't give you a very high rating." In that sense, I think you can say the game music has to be in balance with the other parts of the game, and having the music just stand out on its own is not beneficial for the game." End quote. And I totally agree. If he would have inserted some of the more quote-unquote mature music that you were alluding to in things like Xenosaga, it would have been totally out of place. That is just not appropriate at all for the game. Conversely, if he would have done something like the TMNT Turtles in Time soundtrack, that would have been totally inappropriate too.
Yeah.
So that's like when we say things like mature writing, it's not always as cut and dry as better or worse. I mean, hearing him say that, I can kind of see it. A lot of the compositions in Chrono Trigger, if they weren't in this game, I don't know if they would have survived quite as long. But, that's also not for me to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things, too, is that, like, I feel like Chrono Trigger, and we'll get into this later, is that it's one of those kind of perfect examples of, if it weren't for the sound, like you're saying, this might have just been one of the random JRPGs that's kind of been lost to time. But I genuinely do feel like it's probably like one of the core identities is how well the sound attaches to the art direction in this game. Like the combination of Mitsuda, working alongside, obviously the team that created it, but also, Akira Toriyama's work on the art style. It just, you feel kind of that resonating with these different characters.
So first up, this was, I think, the first one that both you and I picked.
Yeah.
I would say it's probably the most famous from the Chrono Trigger soundtrack, maybe tied with Frog's theme. I would personally put this as a little, like a titch above that. Let's talk about Wind Scene. So, Nick, this was the first track that you sent me. So why don't you tell me what you think of Wind Scene?
This is a really, really good song. And one of the questions that I have for you is like, is this the main theme of Chrono Trigger? Is this like one of the like motifs that gets repeated throughout the game? Or is this just a random track? Because and the reason why I ask is because it has a melody and it has a sound that is so repeatable. It's such a hummable sound. Like I'm probably going to be like singing this or whistling this to myself for the rest of today just because I love this song so much. It's wistful. It has this sense of ennui to it. It's got the sadness paired with this. It's one of those feelings of like you're in a hot summer day and you're stuck in this moment in time, but also at the same time there is this feeling of like loss or a sense of how things have changed irreversibly. I really, really love kind of the emotional characterization in this actual sound, and kind of the crescendo into like the staccatoed rhythms of just the plucking of the strings here. This is really, really well done.
I don't remember where it plays in the game. I think it plays in the overworld whenever you go back to 600 AD. I also know, though, that there's like, I forget what time period it is, but there's like this lady in a bar that is playing piano. And if you give her a tip, she's like, "Oh, thanks, I'll play you my favorite song." And it plays this song, The Wind Scene.
That's so cool.
I don't know that I don't want to make any claims about whether or not it's a theme. I think no, but it's interesting. When I read Ennui, I was like, I think that's an interesting characterization, but I re-listened to it, and do you know what I find very special about the way Mitsuda composed this is it shows how the treatment of a melody, insofar as how the actual notes, the actual like physical vibrations of sound that are being played, the treatment of it can convey different emotions. Because if we were to just play this piece, Wind Scene, up until the very end of the first iteration, just the plucked pizzicato strings, that's not very ennui, is it? Yeah. I don't think so. That's, to me, if it were just that plucked part, that's like that's an oddity of some sort. That's a bit of a quirky mystery, like a small stakes mystery. Like what the hell's in the backyard? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then whenever it's the same exact notes but played with the sweeping strings, carried into this new melody, the B that is still continued in these long strings, with the accompaniment being that classic JRPG bum 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 that we hear in everybody. That's when it's like, in retrospect, suddenly now I hear that initial theme again, and now I'm thinking, okay, there is a sense of forlorn adventure here. Okay, it's in there, but I wasn't primed for it. Does that make any sense at all?
It does. It does make sense. I feel like, especially as somebody who's kind of like going in blind. So, dear listener, you'll understand, as I said earlier in the show, I haven't played the game. So I'm kind of making assumptions based off of just kind of listening to the music by itself without any understanding of like the characters or where their arcs go, but 100% understand where it's like it starts off in that, simple plucked staccato rhythm, and then going on to the sweeping chords with the piano and the instruments. And there's also just like this nice conversation between the violin, and then of course like it's the crescendo into that repeated rhythm that I feels like it's conveying that sense of we're still here, we're still in this moment in time. And somehow that might be sad. It might be sad to me, and maybe that's how I am, but I still think it's really, really interesting. And again, this is something that I will repeat, so I apologize in advance, listeners, but this does, like, the actual sound, the reverb of the plucked strings give this indication that time is important to this work. Like, something about what is going on in time is, like it's giving this sense of stillness, or how things aren't moving when they probably are, is what my interpretation is. But I find it very fascinating.
Interesting. I don't think I would have picked up on that, but I can see that. I think that's a good justification for it. I love his use of pizzicato and staccato. I think he does it extremely well. There is a when you're teaching beginner music students, you teach them staccato means short, and they play everything like that, like, dropping a metal pebble onto a chalkboard. When in reality, staccato means separated. That's all it means, not short. So when I hear Mitsuda doing some of these more separated accompaniments and note choices, it's just great. He does it a lot. We'll see that coming up more. Speaking of, we mentioned the famous tracks. Frog's Theme is another one. Frog's Theme. What are you hearing whenever... I know who Frog is, and I'm assuming you know roughly who Frog is based on his name.
I have a good idea. Yeah, I have a good idea who young Master Frog is. Yeah, so with Frog's Theme, this is another one where it's like, it's another song that, again, I am starting to get the sense of understanding why this is such a celebrated, franchise, not a hidden gem, as I like to joke about. But this is really interesting. Obviously, this is a march, and it's got that kind of that tempered rhythm. I'm not 100% sure what time signature they're working with here, but I do feel like obviously this is it's giving the sense of this very structured, formal personality. Obviously, the theme is describing Frog's character, and it definitely gives this sense of like this character is very kind of formal, but he's also a thoughtful and diligent person, while at the same time, like, he's got this sense of power to him. Like, he has this wisdom or understanding of like what life is going to be like, or how we can accomplish the goal, and this drive to accomplish the goal. I'm hearing that in the melody. I'm hearing in that, from the transition into obviously the drums in that marching rhythm, going into the segue of this kind of just very a magical kind of, I don't know how to characterize it, a very happy theme, I feel like is a good way to talk about it.
Happy, huh?
Happy is maybe the wrong way to say it, but just very determined and maybe jovial is how I would probably say it. Maybe it's just a synonym, I know, but that's probably a better way to characterize it.
Huh. I don't get that at all. I don't get happy or jovial.
Okay.
I think that's a bit, and of course too, it's impossible to escape the bias of knowing the game and knowing the character, but that's a little too far over for me.
It's too much. Okay.
I think there's a nobility and a dignity to it.
Yes.
But one of the cool things about this theme that, it's not readily apparent. Like there are some music where you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, that's happy. That's major, or, oh, that's sad. That's minor. It's very readily apparent what's going on with that sometimes. Not so much here, but it is in a minor key. It is in G minor.
Okay, got it.
But what's interesting about it is that the melody itself doesn't immediately come out and scream G minor. There's no raised seventh, for example. There's no flat six, for example. There's nothing in here, and certainly no interval between the two. There's nothing in here that will make you immediately say G minor, but there's also nothing immediately, in the melody anyway, that screams major. The one time that a chord is outlined in the melody, a major chord that could be the one, it also goes down to the six. So it could also just be a minor 1/7. And it's like,
Yeah.
But I think
for me, it's sorry, go ahead.
No, after you.
I was just going to say, for me, it's the da 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 da. That's just, it conveys this feeling of accomplishment. And maybe I'm just like misunderstanding that for happiness or just, jovialness. Yeah.
Or maybe instead of a better term, instead of happiness, jovialness would be fulfillment or accomplishment is a great one. Accomplished, dignity, dignified.
Right.
This character is somebody with pride. For better or for worse, we don't know. But this is a proud character that has convictions and stands for something. Not arrogant. I don't think there's anything arrogant about this melody. It's very stately. It's very contained. What I do love though is the way Mitsuda treats the accompaniment. Sometimes putting the accompaniment directly on the beats, and sometimes having it accent off the beats. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Da 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 da.
Yeah,
like that's
where the
great.
rhythm is kind of coming in and like accompanying that melody. Yeah, I do like that a lot.
That is one of the other. That is another salient characteristic of Mitsuda's work, is this playfulness with rhythm and experimentation with rhythm. He loves displacing rhythm. He uses metric modulations all the time in almost every game. Yes, you hear it so often. Once you hear it, you'll know what it sounds like, and then it's like, oh yeah, I hear that a lot. We'll talk more about the rhythmic displacement and the metric modulation stuff a little bit later. There are some very clear examples coming up. Hold tight. It's great. He loves doing that. Frog's theme is really fantastic. Frog's theme is one that everybody talks about.
In Chrono Trigger, if you don't mind me asking, are some of these themes, do they, when you're playing the game, and I feel like, I've played it enough, I'm battling characters, I'm fighting, but do they do the thing where they'll take the theme and they'll let the theme play out during battle? Because I could easily see Frog's theme like being played while you're like fighting bad guys on the overworld map.
No, not with Frog's theme.
Okay.
It plays during some pivotal scenes with Frog, but by and large, the battles are going to be just standard battle music.
The battle music. Okay, got it.
By and large, that's Chrono Cross. That happens a lot. Chrono Cross there are like 2 or 3 times that boss music is not just the standard boss music, and it is a real shame. But
okay, interesting.
Let's talk about the Guardia Millennium Fair. I'm a big fan of this one. This highlights another thing that Mitsuda does a ton in his music, and that is put the bass front and center.
Yeah.
Oftentimes either upright bass or fretless bass. Here it's upright bass, but he uses it throughout here. It is very high in the mix, and it's always driving towards the next downbeat. Doon, doo-doo-doon, doo-doo-doo-doon, doo-doo-doo-doon. It's always moving forward instead of just kind of hanging back playing root notes. He loves doing that. Like bass is, if I hear bass doing cool things, I'm like, there's a 15% chance this is Mitsuda.
Yeah, I definitely love like the bass, the way that it kind of carries through the song in itself. But I think more than anything else, and of course this is like where we're starting to get that influence of the world music, the actual Celtic Scottish folk instruments that are coming in here, being front and center. It's just so good, man. And it's definitely, of course, like I think in one of the YouTube videos that I was listening to this on said this, like, this is the song that I think of whenever I'm walking into a Renaissance fair. And it's so true, right? Like, this is exactly what you would imagine it being. And it's very cool because at the very beginning of Chrono Trigger, that's what you're doing. You're going to a fair. They even have games for you to play. Am I correct in understanding this is the song that plays when you go to that fair at the very beginning?
Yeah, that is the fair.
Okay.
That's the Millennium Fair.
Gotcha.
They're celebrating the millennium of their town.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Mitsuda has a real talent for writing these pieces of like people-centered music. It happens in Chrono Cross as well. These pieces that are they seem very believable, that they are diegetic to the world, that they could be playing in the world, that they are being played out of celebration and emotion of the people that are there, like music of the people. Not just like a composition by the composer put in to make a scene sad or happy.
Right.
He has a real talent for writing music that sounds like it came from the lives of these everyday people. And this is that, this is music that they're dancing to, they're celebrating to. This is good time music. He's great at that.
Yeah, and it fits the vibe of what's going on at this festival. Obviously, there's the thing that's carrying you through it, but just like everyone that you talk to there is having such a good time, and like there are these games that you can play and you can collect these different coins. It's like, it really struck me how funny this game is up front, because all of the lines and all of the writing for these just random NPCs are so kind of just like present and realized as like as you said, this is just a very diegetic composition in terms of like feeling and believing that you're there at this fair, you're enjoying your time at this festival. And I really like this track. I do have a question. Does Trigger go to really dark places?
No, I wouldn't say really dark. No.
Okay. Gotcha. Because like some of the stuff, I was like, am I about to get my heart broken by like what's going, because I feel like we find that often with JRPGs is that they have like all of these like happy kind of like bright, fantastical moments that you experience in the front end. And then it's just kind of like devastation in the latter third. And so much of the work or the songs that we've listened to so far for Trigger, I'm just like, am I going to about to get my heart pulled out of my chest? So
no,
yeah,
that's Chrono Cross.
Oh, okay, great. Wonderful.
Before we move on, I'm also a big fan of the contrasting sections here, where it's just everything falls out and it's just that sort of penny whistle and a very, very light accompaniment underneath it. Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Want to do Secret of the Forest?
Yeah.
This was one that you wrote quite a bit about. So what do you think about Secret of the Forest?
This carries a lot of similarities to a different track that we kind of cut Corridors in Time, where it's like he's playing with arpeggios, but it's this very mysterious, very kind of wistful, whimsical melody, and I have no concept of where this plays in the game, again, just because, I'm not that far into it. But what I will say is that this is genuinely like a very, very beautiful track, and probably my favorite of the batch that we're going to discuss on the show today. But I really do think it's just a great example of how he's able to use kind of that simple approach towards his melodies, and how that can really, really convey various emotions. Like, there's a lot of things going on in this track all at the same time. There's the mystery of like, what is going on here? What is the secret of the forest? And there's also a lot of bass, again, front and center, like dun dun, as the arpeggio of the piano is kind of going on in the background. It's really, really beautiful. And I think that there's again, I'm projecting, so there's no really telling whether or not like this is true, but I feel like there's some type of there's something morose about what's going on, or like the secret of the forest, or maybe there's some type of hidden power that really affects the party for the rest of the game that's involved in this secret. But yeah, more than anything else, this is another example of, I feel nostalgic. I feel like there's this longing for a better time that's in the music here. And then there's also just great use of like layered effects. You can hear like the different sounds that are in like the background of kind of just that staccatoed rhythm that kind of break up the melody just a little bit, that make you feel like as the player you're in the forest and you're kind of moving through that scene. I think it's just generally very beautiful, and it's great.
Yeah, Mitsuda really likes to do sort of vibes and aesthetics like this. The ethereal, the spacey, the uncertain feelings and moods that you might get when you're in an unfamiliar dark place like a forest. He's very good at that. And honestly, sounds like this are what define this era of JRPG for me.
Okay.
I'm not saying they're my favorite, but whenever I hear something like this, I think, okay, that's an SNES RPG for sure.
Yeah.
This is also the track that gave birth to this popular sort of idea of the Mitsuda lick.
Oh, okay.
It's the melody that you hear almost immediately. Da 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 da. That sort of jump up to the third chromatic fall down. There is a YouTube video that goes over this. The long and short of it is I don't agree with the analysis of this. I think, not everything needs to be an essay or an analysis. I think this is just one of those things that, sometimes composers and performers will just have language they fall back on. And it's certainly not cadential material because it doesn't function cadentially. All this is a one, an extension of the tonic, if you're assuming it starts on the tonic. The children yearn for Schenkerian analysis. They made fun of it in grad school, and now they all yearn for it. So it's not doing anything cadential, but for it to be a lick, it would need to be more involved and identifiable. Really, the only thing here is a chromatic fall down a minor third, and that's just not enough for me to say it's a lick, like a true lick. But there are videos exploring this on YouTube. They're fine videos. I have nothing against the videos or the creators, but if you hear that, Mitsuda does it a lot. Mm-hmm. But counterpoint, I think it also just sounded good on those sound chips because you also hear it a lot in Mitsuda. Did I get those mixed up? I meant to say Mitsuda does it a lot, but you also hear it a lot in Uematsu because it sounds good on these sound chips. That's what I was trying to say.
And so the SNES was limited at the time in terms of the sounds that it could actually produce, which is why you hear a lot of the same tonal range of like the instruments that are used. Is that true to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the Genesis is considered to have the better sound chip. Don't quote me on that. I'm not actually sure.
Sega, they knew what they were doing back then. It's a shame.
I wanted to make a quick insert to talk a little bit about the, quote, vibes associated with both this track and Mitsuda. Because here in Secret of the Forest, he's doing two things that we see a lot in his music, and I want to highlight them for you real quick. Taking a look at the opening of Secret of the Forest, just the first 8 bars before the flute melody comes in, fundamentally what we have is just a back and forth between G flat and F. We're going back and forth in the bass. If we're continuing that Schenker joke that I'm sure 2 people at most in the audience appreciated, this whole introduction is just highlighting G flat. G flat is the tonal center, and it's being highlighted back and forth, back and forth. There's no other harmonic motion. Okay, cool. So what are the things Mitsuda's doing to make this sound so vibesy, to make it sound so ethereal, effervescent, spacey, weightless as in a dream? Well, there are 2 things, and they both come down to the harmony. The first is the use of fourths and fifths, quartal and quintal harmony. We call these perfect intervals in music. These are diatonic intervals that don't lend themselves to a sound of major or minor. They exist in both major and minor key centers, and they don't inherently sound one way or the other. They sound very open. Mitsuda plays with these intervals a ton, both in dyads, triads, and chords, as well as being outlined in melodic intervals. Here in the opening, let's take a look here. In the left hand, The opening arpeggio is B flat up to E flat, F, and then up to a higher B flat. Then we drop down the octave and repeat that pattern. B flat to E flat, right away, that's a fourth. Now E flat up to F, that's only a step, but if we look at that pattern as a whole, we've got those 4 notes taking place on the first beat, 1 E and a, 4 16th notes. The strongest of those 4 16th notes in general are always going to be the first and the third, 1 E and a. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm not saying that works for every performance. It certainly does not. And in fact, if you play that way, your music can sound a little bit herky-jerky and marchy, Mickey Mousey, but that's generally how it goes. And here, that would be B flat and F. That itself is a fifth. So we've got B flat to E flat, that's a jump of a fourth. And then we've got a quasi sort of hidden fifth there too, with B flat to F. And then, of course, the third and fourth notes there, F up to B flat, that's another fourth. And you could also say, too, that B flat down to the octave B flat, that's an octave, another perfect interval. So we have got nothing but perfect intervals here in this opening, adding to that sound that defies, quote, major or minor. You hear a lot of quartal and quintal harmony in jazz as well, especially once you get later, quote unquote, later into folks like Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock. The second of the two things I said I would mention are the harmonies themselves, what he's doing with chords. And Mitsuda loves to add not just quartal and quintal harmony, but harmonic extensions as well, especially those that we see in jazz. So let's take a look again. I said that this is just G flat to F back and forth, but I didn't say what else was going on. So we talked about the first measure here with that pattern, B flat up to E flat, up to F, up to B flat. The left hand of the piano, aka the electric bass, that's just going from G flat, D flat, G flat. And the D flat is so quick that you can almost not even count it. Same deal whenever we get to the second part of the pattern too, by the way, F. It's the same pattern, F, C, F, 1, 5, 1. Typical bass stuff, you know? Hear it in everything from jazz to country and western. That's all 3 kinds of music. Most analyses that I see of this, and I would agree with it, have this labeled as G flat major 7 to F minor 9. Okay, so what's that about? Let's talk about it real quick. G flat major 7 has the standard G flat chord, 1, 3, 5. You know, that's the triad Leonard Cohen sang about. Adding that 7 in there does make the chord feel somewhat more unstable. If you were in a standard practice theory, a common practice tonality class, a standard theory class, you would probably be told not to use that on strong, authentic cadences, for example. It adds a sense of mild dissonance putting that major 7 in there, because it's only a half step away from the eighth, which is the 1, the octave. It's not an intense dissonance, though. It's more of a spaced out, very pleasant one. How does the right hand of the piano fit into this? Well, the B flats that we talked about, that's the third. Okay, cool. G flat, B flat. Doing great. And we've got the D in the bass as well. We've got our chord. Hallelujah, as Leonard Cohen would say. What else is going on here, though? Well, we've got an F in the left hand, as we said. That's the major 7. Okay, we've got that. We've got an E flat here, too, though. What's that about? Well, there are 2 ways that you can look at this. The E flat, as I previously alluded to before, it's on the E of each beat. 1 E and a, 2 E and a. So you could consider it just a simple sort of passing note in the pattern. You don't have to consider it as part of the analysis. But why I think it merits bringing up is that if we were to consider E flat, it would be the 6th or the 13th, depending on how you want to analyze that. There are only 7 notes in the Western scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Once we get to 8, we start over. So E flat could be seen as the 6th or the 13th. That is a harmony not seen a ton in quote-unquote classical music until you start getting into the late Romantic era. You're not going to hear that intentionally done and emphasized, both of those being key qualifiers there, in music very much before 1900. Myself, I would consider this probably not part of the overall harmonic analysis, but because Mitsuda is so prone to using extensions like this in his chords, I wanted to point it out. And if you can believe it, we're still not done. There's actually a third thing that we could talk about here too. When we go to the F minor 9, that's the second part of the pattern, G flat to F minor, G flat to F minor. As I said, the bass, the left hand of the piano, is really just doing root 5th. So what about the right hand? Well, the notes we have here are C natural, E flat, G natural, which is an accidental in this key, up to A flat, and then starts the pattern over again. A couple of things here. First, if we're doing F minor, we assume that we must have F, A flat, and C, and we've got those. We've got C, we've got F in the bass, we've got C in both hands, actually, and we've got A flat right at the very top of the piano. That leaves two notes here, E flat and G. E flat is our minor 7. Okay, perfect. And G is our 9. There we go. This is about as textbook as they come, so you might not think very much of this. There's also no strange chordal or quintal things going on. So why did I want to highlight this? Well, as I said, we're going back and forth from G flat to F, and the first chord is a G flat major of some sort. So you might think, well, we're in G flat major, but it's not quite that simple. If we were in G flat major, we would expect a couple of things breaking up our G flat chords. We would expect something different to help prolong that sort of quote-unquote tonic harmony. And F minor ain't one of them. And here's why. In G flat major, the fourth of that scale shouldn't be C. It should be C flat. G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat. Why does that matter? Well, typically that 4 chord is going to be in between 1 chords. It is a very common neighboring chord between this. I think it's neighbor chord. I might be wrong on that. Anyway, it's a very common chord to hear between 1s to prolong that harmony. And 4 is a very stable part of any given major tonality. The 4th and the 5th are 2 that you don't mess with without throwing in some real harmonic wrenches into the analysis. And that's kind of happening here. Not only because the 4th is raised, we've got C natural instead of C flat, but because it is emphasized on the downbeat of each and every beat. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, C each time. Sharp 4. That sharp 4 lends to a sound called Lydian. I'm not going to get into modes and everything. Suffice to say, the sound of the Lydian mode is typically considered sort of spacey, sort of open, sort of wide. And add to that too, we have a G natural thrown in the mix here, which as it's written is a sharp 1. Now, of course, you could say that that's just an embellishment to the A flat because we're doing F minor. A flat is the 3rd. We could just say that that is a simple lead up to emphasize the A flat, of course. Honestly, that's what I would say too. But because we are talking about extensions and Mitsuda's predilection toward them, I think it's worth pointing out. So to recap real quick, what's making this stuff sound so vibesy in the beginning? 1, lack of harmonic motion. G flat to F, back and forth, back and forth. 2, chordal quintal harmony. Lots of 4ths and 5ths, whether directly played in harmony, outlined, or even alluded to. 3, harmonic extensions in the chords. You've got 9s, you've got 13s, you've got sharp 4s. And 4, an allusion to the sound of the Lydian mode, that sharp 4, that spaciness, that openness, that bright, wide quality that comes with it. I told you I was going to tell you a couple of tree things, and I told you 4. Actually, I told you 2, and then I told you 4, so there you go. Why don't we talk a little bit about Chrono Cross? Perhaps a little bit less so, because we talked a lot about the music in 3 episodes of Chrono Cross. I think, I don't know if we necessarily need to spend a ton of time on it, but Arnie is the hometown of the protagonist. I think Mitsuda is also extremely good at town music. I think he's one of the best at town music. Arnie is a classic example. I don't think you even need to have played Cross to know what kind of town Arnie is, just by hearing this opening steel string guitar.
Is Mitsuda, I know that you said that he's a pianist, but is he like a classical guitarist as well? Or did think this is just like a performance by a musician that he's worked with? Because it just feels like he has a great understanding of the guitar, and the general, like the warm vibes that I get from the Arnie town that's being described here is through the music is just really nice and comforting and welcoming.
I wonder about that too. It kind of depends. Sometimes composers will know what kind of idiosyncrasies each instrument can do. Sometimes they don't, and it's a performer's sort of choice. Sometimes they work together, and the performer will do something, and they'll be like, "Oh, wow, what was that? Do that. Whatever that was, do that." And then they kind of learn that way. I'm not sure.
That's cool.
Maybe he does play guitar. I don't know. But yeah, you don't even need to know Arnie. It's like you hear the acoustic steel string guitar. it's a very carefree, populated, tropical town.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those feelings that you get. Like, there's, again, the sense of timelessness, but you also get the sense of like the people that live there are folks that obviously will welcome you and give you a nice plate of, whatever tropical Chrono Cross food that they have laying around, and you kind of just you're meant to have a good time there. It's nice.
Let's talk Bound by Fate. I don't think we talked about the music in this one in the show. I commented on it. I don't remember if we talked about it. Let's talk a little Bound by Fate.
Yeah, Bound by Fate. This is a really fascinating track. It sounds like he has like a limited orchestra that's playing here right now. There's a lot of strings that are going on all at the same time. But yeah, obviously this is again a great example of when we talk about the maturity of a lot of Mitsuda's work. I feel like this is a wonderful, wonderful example of kind of the conveyance of something that's really, really dire, has happened or is going to happen. So this is a really, really beautiful track. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on it as a whole.
This is kind of like his own little adagio for strings.
Okay.
It's gorgeous. It was my favorite piece until we got to another piece later in the game that you might just miss because that whole goddamn section is optional for some reason. Bound by Fate is great. And what I love about it too is that it is, well, one, I love the romantic aspect of it, romantic as in the period of music aspect of it, just extremely lush, lots and lots of vibrato in the strings. I wish there were more. In what we're hearing there. There's one crescendo. You had mentioned that he does crescendos well earlier before. What he also does well, and this might be him, this might be the sound engineer, I don't know. He treats harmonies and middle voices very well. There's the crescendo into like every cymbal crash in here. I don't know if it's viola or cello or what, but one of the middle harmony voices is mixed really high. You might even argue too high. One of those middle harmony voices, and it's just a beautiful color in that chord as it's driving into those downbeats and into those cadences. It aids in a sense of propulsion. We're propelled toward that cadence, that cymbal crash, with a greater intensity because of it. I love that he does that. I love that he doesn't just solely focus on the bass and the soprano, whatever the soprano happens to be.
Part of the things about this specific track too is that, this is the version that I'm listening to is generally, it seems like it is something that's composed for a piece of hardware that has much more advanced system. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rick. It was so Chrono Trigger, SNES, Chrono Cross, PlayStation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, and I think that this is another example of like how readily apparent that is and how he's able to do so much more with what he's giving here in terms of like the different conversations that are going on between the strings and Bound by Fate. But I definitely think that, again, like you're saying, like the cymbal crashes and the just the general back and forth that you have on this melody is it seems really intense. I'm not sure where this happens, but no spoilers for potential players and listeners.
No, and what's nice about it is it doesn't readily give you a definitive emotion, right? This is what another area where Mitsuda excels is that this isn't definitively sad. You listen to this and you might think like, oh, this isn't happy music, this is sad. But it's like, is it sad? Or can we use better words to more accurately describe this? Is it bittersweet? Is it nostalgic? Is it forlorn? Is it sad? Is it, like you had said before, is it ennui? What is it? There is a sadness in there, but it is not adequate to just say this is sad because the music is more complex than that. Like you said, no spoilers, but that is very much what's going on in that scene.
Interesting.
The emotions are mixed.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I feel like I've heard you talk a little bit about Chrono Cross just through, obviously interacting with you in the servers and, different, screenshots that I've seen you play of it and everything. And it feels like specifically in Bound by Fate, it doesn't feel like it has like a musical resolution. Like it doesn't feel like the melody is fully resolved even throughout the course of the thing. And I'm sure it does, in its own way. But to me, like it doesn't, in a very, very, definitive contrast with like Frog's theme, it has multiple resolutions within that like composition as a whole. Whereas Bound by Fate, I feel like it has this continuing on and this feeling of uncertainty. I would have assumed that a character either just died and then now the main character or the party leader is kind of questioning with himself, okay, what do we do next? Like, what is my responsibility to continue and carry on with the mission or where we're going with the objective in Chrono Cross. So yeah, it's a very interesting soundtrack.
That lack of clear cadential material in motion is 100% intentional. Based on where this happens and what's going on. That is, he did that on purpose.
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool.
I had mentioned before that Mitsuda really likes to play with rhythm, and he does this thing called metric modulation quite a bit. You can hear this in a lot of his tracks. Two that I have here are Viper Manor and Dragon God, where there are two sections. Viper Manor is maybe a little clearer to hear. Well, no, that's not true. They're a little bit different in their context, actually. You can hear him overlaying the different groupings of a meter. What that means is, let's say a meter has 6 beats in it, 6 eighth notes. You can group 6 as 3 plus 3. You can also group 6 as 2 plus 2 plus 2, right? And if you put an accent, like a weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, on each of those downbeats, each of the first of those groupings, you get either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He plays with those kinds of rhythms a lot. You can call that metric modulation if it's like in Dragon God, where it goes from one beat that's constant to the next beat that's constant. The eighth notes change their grouping immediately. In Viper Manor, I would maybe just call it a hemiola, to be honest with you. Just sort of puts the 2 plus 2 plus 2 on top of the 3 plus 3. So you get that constant 2 plus 3 sort of grouping. Now, I'm not going to re-record an explanation here because I think that was an adequate one, factoring in the time of day and the lack of caffeine, all of those excuses. But I made a grave error in teaching and in writing, and that is assuming knowledge. Put it another way, I assumed that my audience could see inside of my brain and knew what I was thinking. If this were in front of a certain kind of theory class, that would be fine, but that's not the case here, so I wanted to give a better explanation here with an example. Going to Dragon God, take a listen to this bit of the track. There is a transition from an A section into a B section. Take a listen. Here we see an example of the metric modulation. What that means is we're going from one grouping of eighth notes, 2 plus 2 plus 2, to a grouping of 3 plus 3 plus 3. The time signatures right now aren't important, it's just where the emphasis lies. In that first part, it was in 2. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and when it transitions, it goes into a sort of sea shanty-esque kind of feel. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. Again, time signatures don't matter here, just the groupings. I'm going to try, if I were to try to half sing it and clap it to emphasize the beats, we get you get that transition 2 to 3. The whole time, the beat stays constant. The only change is what's being emphasized. I'll try to clap it without yapping into the mic to give a better example. That clapping stayed totally consistent. Not to pat myself on the back, it's just the emphasis. 2 plus 2 plus 2, 3 plus 3 plus 3. In Viper Manor, it's a little bit different because it doesn't modulate so much as it just coexists from the start. That's why it might be more appropriate to call this a hemiola. Take a listen to this. This is kind of set up from the beginning. We get the bass in a sort of swing feel. Could be 3, could be 2, not sure. The vibraphone sets up pretty clearly that it's 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Playing on the downbeats, the ones, and using the 3 to lead into the 1. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. A strong note on every 1, tying into 2, not replaying on 2, playing a note on 3 that leads us back into 1. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, dun, 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 dun. So you might think, okay, we're in 3 plus 3 plus 3, whatever, time signature doesn't matter right now. Then the strings come in, the pizzicato strings, keeping the eighth note constant, playing 2 plus 2 plus 2, grouping 2 plus 2 plus 2. Da 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 da. 1, 2, and 1, 2, and. We have a simultaneous duple meter, 2 plus 2 plus 2, duple, with triple meter, 3 plus 3 plus 3. The eighth note stays the same. The eighth note's clapping here, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3. Eighth note stays the same, ba, 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 1, 2, and. We call that hemiola. Whenever we have a duple and a triple sort of rhythm playing over each other. It's more complicated. It's a little more complicated than that, but there's no need to over-explain here. The point is, we've got 3 plus 2 existing at the same time. It might take a couple of listens to internalize what that sounds like, what that feels like, but once you notice it, once you can pick that out, you will hear it all throughout Mitsuda's catalog. This sort of playfulness with the rhythm and the meter, the tendency to use extensions in the harmony and open intervals, quartal, quintal harmony. That is Mitsuda. And of course, a driving, badass bass. He loves that. You will hear that everywhere. Let's talk The Girl Who Stole the Stars. This is my favorite piece that Mitsuda did on this entire soundtrack for Chrono Cross.
And I can tell why. I think that this might be one of my favorite songs of his, like, by far, as a whole. This is a really, really emotionally powerful song. Did you say that this track was something that you could miss because it was part of side content?
So it happens a couple of times throughout the game. I think, well, actually, no. Now, it might only happen here. Okay. It definitely happens in one scene that you can miss that gives critical backstory and lore to one of the main characters, not arguably the main character, but one of the most important characters, and also to the story and how it connects to Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
It is insane that this is optional. I don't know why they did it. I wish they wouldn't have. It's frustrating that they did. If it appears outside of here, it only appears maybe once, but I don't remember it. So it might just be totally missable.
Okay. Interesting.
So I just introduced this to you today. So what do you like so much about it?
Yeah, so you put this in today? I feel like you it might have been here a little bit beforehand, but no, yeah, this is a really, really beautiful track. I think that this is, again, one of my favorites just because there are a lot of conversations, again, once going on between the piano, between the flute, as well as the violin that kind of comes in and like finishes it off. There's a female vocalization in the melody, the da 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 da. I don't know, it's something about it, again, is, I think, intensely expressive, and I think that this is probably describing the character who's like super important to the game and like one of the probably the core, ideas that they're exploring in this story. I think that obviously because of the scale, I put this in the notes as well. Like I put this, the scale really, really reminds me the first time I played Link's Awakening. I didn't play the original. I played the remake. I know I'm trash, but I played the remake that they did for the Switch. And this was at a really interesting time in my life. I was laid up in bed, and I was playing Zelda Link's Awakening for the first time. And there's the moment where Link washes up on the shore and he finds Marin. And if I'm not mistaken, in this example, Marin is singing to the Windfish in this song called The Ballad of the Windfish, Marin's version. And I literally just burst into tears after thinking, because it just hit me on a very deep, intense, like emotional level for some reason or another. I was like, why am I crying over a Legend of Zelda game? It's silly, right? But this, I think part of like the sound of that vocal, the longing, it also like reminds me of the scene in Howl's Moving Castle when I think it's like how you as the audience are experiencing Howl remember when he was a child and he swallowed the star that like fell from the heaven. And it's just like one of the things that just, it again drives home this timeless nature of the way that Mitsuda composes like the emotional core of his work and how he like drives that forward. Yeah, it's nice. This is a must listen for people who are interested in the soundtrack.
You know what, too? I wonder if you noticed this. This is another penchant of Mitsuda's that was actually one of the first things I noticed about him. He really loves to use, okay, for example, if we think of Uematsu, one of the first instruments you think of with Uematsu is piano, right? You got ragtime piano, rock and roll piano, beautiful piano. Right. Xanarkin piano. You think of piano because he loves it. Mm-hmm. He plays it. Yeah. With Mitsuda, it's not so much that I think of one instrument, although I might think of guitar, I guess. But until the PS2, he really liked to use instruments that weren't inherently like powerful. Like he didn't use a ton of low brass or trumpet or electric guitar. He did use those things, but not a ton. He preferred instruments that had the potential to be more intimate, like flute, like here, like a softer piano, like a guitar. Oftentimes, actually, it's funny you mentioned classical guitar before. Oftentimes, you can hear him using different strings on the guitar, like steel versus nylon. Maybe even half and half. Do they make half and half guitars? Is it like an Arnold Palmer guitar? Do they make those?
Yeah, probably on those dual neck guitars. Just putting one on the other. You know what I mean? It's great.
But he's a big fan of using those sorts of instruments that aren't inherently don't inherently have this sort of power to them. And flute is a great example here. He combines the flute with that piano with a child's voice, which is just a perfect combination. And the child's melody too, the vocalization, if you were to just sing it by itself, it is very unclear what the child might be feeling. It is totally dependent on what is being put around it. Like so much of what a child's life and feelings are, right? Yeah. So much dependent on its surroundings, a sort of malleable clay. And there's something terrifying and beautiful about that. And Mitsuda is able to capture that in this track. While also, I mean, not to just try and pretentiously analyze it. I mean, the music itself is very beautiful too. Mitsuda's at work once again with suspended harmonies and coloring chords with extensions. There are many open intervals here, fourths and fifths, all throughout the introduction as well, both in the outlined melody and the notes sounding simultaneously. This is just like we talked about with Secret of the Forest. It lends the first 12 bars a feeling of being out of time, appropriately enough, always teasing just enough to not imply a definitive tonal home base. And while the girl's voice in the B phrase tries to outline an implied G major tonality, very simple in fact. Sol, fa, mi, do, sol, fa, mi, re, do, ti, do. Very, very basic. That's something you would sight sing. That's something you could sing in middle school. And even though it's that straightforward, it's met with quintal harmony, almost entirely stacked fifths with octaves displaced. It's only the bass line, an ominous A, F natural, E quasi-cadential figure, that gives both an impression of something in the flavor of Phrygian, maybe, but more importantly, a sense of dis-ease. All is not well, or at least not certain. It's a beautiful framing of this scene, and in fact first appeared in the Satellaview version of Radical Dreamers. Much of Chrono Cross's tracks did. The PlayStation's increased power and ability for orchestrated sounds is a major boon to this track. I'll play the original, the Satellaview version, as a segue out of Chrono Cross and into the next section. I don't know. I don't know the Ballad of the Windfish just offhand. I have played Link's Awakening, the original.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, I couldn't even sing it if you asked me to.
Yeah, it's similar to where it's got the strings that are going on in the background that are kind of separated or punctuated rather by the girl's or the child's voice that you can hear kind of in the conversation, and it's one of those too where this is a very complimentary melody I feel like that he has going on here, and I think it's a similar where we talked about Bound by Fate, where this is an uncertain moment. This feels like an uncertain moment, but also like a moment of longing and a moment of just like, it's just deeply felt emotion that like a child might feel. So yeah, this is really, really fascinating, man. Here's the thing, Rick. I'm upset with you because I don't have time to go explore these 30, 40, 50-hour JRPGs, but gosh darn it, I really, really want to. I really want to now.
You can hear the longing in the conversation between the piano and flute as well, with the leaps in the flute. I don't remember exactly which of those 5 key centers the song is actually in, but you hear that sort of yearning and that longing in those dramatic leaps and the little resolutions that apparently are like half Mitsuda licks or something. That when that piece comes in, it is, I think, my favorite scene in Chrono Cross. It is it is also some of the best the PlayStation 1 ever looks. Chrono Cross in general, just in terms of sound and looks, is some of the best PlayStation 1 material you will find out there. I'm not saying it's the best, but it is among them. Easy top 3, I would say. It's just a fantastic game.
That's excellent. You sold me. I'm going to do it now. I'm going to have to do it after Trigger, since it is a spiritual, no, not spiritual, it's an actual successor.
No, do not believe anybody that says it is not a sequel or that you don't need to play Trigger to play Cross. It is explicitly tied to Trigger. If you do not play Trigger, the game will not hit in any way that it is trying to.
Okay, interesting.
So foolish. Also, I guess it's also worth saying too, a lot of this music was like roughly half of it, I think Mitsuda said, was written for Radical Dreamers, which was originally a Satellaview game, a text-based adventure that came after Chrono Trigger that was supposed to be a sort of sequel to it. It did not do very well, so they reworked the story into Chrono Cross. Now Radical Dreamers got re-released on the Radical Dreamers re-release on the Switch and PC. It is now they've added some stuff to it that makes it kind of canon. But the cool thing about the Chrono series is the joke that Chris and I had on the show is that if you were to ask Masato Kato, what is canon in Chrono? Like this scene, is this canon? This scene, is this canon? His response to every single one would be to lace his fingers, lean back in his chair and say, well, what do you think? And then you would say what you thought, and he said, that is a good explanation. I like that. And then you'd say, but what about the opposite? What about the people that are saying that it's not because of this? And you would say, That's a good explanation. I like it. Just whatever you want.
I hate him so much.
Oh, I love it. I think it's great.
No, it's good. It's definitely good. I'm one of those people that definitely need my creators to be like, this is the defined, like, this is what it means. Like, tell me what it means. I mean, it is important for your audience to be able to interpret your work as well. But no, that's very funny that he does that.
So let's talk about some of the music that Mitsuda is maybe less known for. Some of the music that doesn't come up immediately, like Xenogears or Chrono Trigger. And the first of those is a game that I have been recommended to play time and time and time again, Shadow Hearts 2. I don't know anything about this game. I don't know any of the context behind either of these.
Yeah, I have absolutely no context on either of the Shadow Hearts as well. But from the music that you shared, I enjoy a lot of what's going on here. This is funky, and this also, I feel like, shows an evolution in the way that he kind of has like evolved as a composer and as somebody who's worked on these types of games.
Field of Dog God is one of the two that I have written here, that I've listed down. It's just piano, but what I think is really cool about it is he really leans into these very dissonant harmonies and voicings of chords in such a way that it makes the listener very sort of queasy and unsure of where the harmony's going and where the piece is going. And it doesn't start that way though.
Yeah, there's a lot of like you will probably be much more well equipped to describe it in a way better than I could. But with the Field of Dog God, I feel like with his track specifically, he's interpreting, or he's kind of like he's drawing major and minor chords together that don't feel like they fit very well. And I feel like that's probably what's again, that's pretty significant in terms of what you're attributing to the uneasiness. But there's also portions of this track in specific that are just very calming and very soothing, and I really enjoy it. It's nice.
Yeah, he is a self-described fan of jazz as well. Like he says all the time that he loves jazz. I mean, he grew up listening to Art Blakey, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
And some of these chords that he's putting in, it's not that they're dissonant, quote unquote, so much as they just have a lot of extensions in them or some alterations. There is a lot of dissonance leading up into, I don't know, it's like a minute in when you get that first sort of more quote unquote traditional sort of sounding piano soundscape. Mm-hmm. But up until then, he's playing with a lot of different dissonances. You had said mixing major and minor stuff together. He's not doing a standard progression of, tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic, 1, 4, 5, 1. He's not doing that.
Yeah. Okay.
Not interested. And he's also perhaps not writing in a key center at first. I don't know.
Okay.
It's very good. This was the first track of Shadow Hearts that I listened to. Shadow Hearts Covenant, it is also called.
Yeah.
The other one that I have listed down is titled Astaroth, Battle with a Fallen Angel. This is one that you boot up at first you're like, I wonder who composed this, and within 30 seconds you're saying, oh, this is Mitsuda.
Yeah, this specifically the beginning of this track, the dun 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 dun. Again, that's just Chrono Trigger, right? There's multiple tracks from Chrono Trigger where he does immediately that, but then it jumps into this really cool, funky mix of world music. He's got drums, he's got other types of ethnic stringed instruments that I'm not aware of, and then you hear that bass, the dun 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 dun, and it's awesome. This is really cool. You know what's funny about this track though? Doesn't feel like a battle track. Doesn't feel like something that where you would be fighting a character in this. I don't know. Do you disagree?
You know, you're not the first to criticize his battle. Well, first of all, I don't actually know if this is a battle track. I'm assuming it is. It's got battle in the name.
Yeah.
He wouldn't lie to us.
He wouldn't lie to us, would he?
But there are so many people that criticize, and you and I were talking about this before. We might as well just talk about it here. So many people criticize his battle music, specifically Xenogears and Chrono Cross. Have you heard the Xenogears battle music?
I have. I actually looked them up and I've been listening to them throughout this week. The one thing about the Chrono Cross, and we spoke about this last night, I don't understand why people don't like it. It feels like a very enjoyable, listenable, repeatable track that I wouldn't characterize it as something that like doesn't lack identity. I feel like it has its own kind of identity that fits in with the rest of the tracks that I've heard from Chrono Cross. So I'm not really sure why people are kind of like calling that out as being like quote unquote like garbage battle music. So yeah, I think it's good.
I think I do. By the way, going Xenogears for a second, I think that's actually the weakest of his battle musics, is Xenogears.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, by far. And I think the reason that people don't like his battle music, and this is reductive, but I'm just using it to give a pithy response, it's because he writes pieces and not songs.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, think about the battle music that people like. It's Uematsu and Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
It's, a bass line with a melody. That's what people like.
Right.
And it's harmonically, it's simple. They want that simple bass line. They want a groove, But Mitsuda isn't necessarily interested in writing a song. Like, he wants to have cool harmonies. He wants dissonance. Like, the opening of Xenosaga's battle music is just
the strings that are
yeah, and then more apparent in Chrono Cross is just a flurry of chromaticism that gives you this sense of anxiety, almost like you're about to fight something, right?
Yeah.
And there's melody in it. I mean, the Chrono Cross battle melody, like whatever it is.
Right.
I just drifted into 3 key centers, but never listened. If a musician says like, oh, they can't sing on pitch, don't listen to them. That's not true. Some of the best musicians I've ever met were terrible singers. I mean, hey, it's an instrument. Your voice is an instrument, man. And if you don't practice that instrument, you think you're going to be able to just sing stuff? You think I don't hear in my head that it's wrong? I do.
I look in the mirror and I can hear myself.
But no, I think it's because he just doesn't write like songs. And I'm not saying that that's good or bad. If people want to hear that, then, they would maybe go to Uematsu, but
yeah,
I think the Chrono Cross battle music is fine. You know why it's annoying is because you hear it non-goddamn stop because it plays
because they have too
constantly.
many battle scenarios, I see.
Yes, it is literally every battle scenario is that.
Interesting. So that's probably more of like a game design issue as opposed to like his composition. And what I was going to say too is like Xenosaga's battle music I loved. And I played that game for like 30, 35 hours or something like that. And I felt like another one that's like very enjoyable, which possibly could be attributed to the fact that it is a PS2 composed soundtrack. But even then, I don't think that necessarily matters as much. But I'm curious, when you say that he composes pieces, not songs, what does that mean to you?
Just not quite so simple as like a song that you might hear on the radio.
Okay. Some more comprehensive works, right?
Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, outro, that kind of thing. Melody, bass, percussion, drums, that kind of thing. I don't know. It's also a bit reductive and a bit dismissive. But I think we need to move back towards gatekeeping a little bit. We're getting too inviting,
Okay.
I'm saying that as a joke, but I actually do believe that. Anyway, back to the Shadow Hearts thing. Yeah, it's really cool. The bass, obviously, that Mitsuda. As soon as I heard the first bass fill, like that little chromatic walk up, I'm like, okay, this is, and then of course you get that little front and center fill. Like it's all bass for that 2 seconds. And
it's so good.
Yeah, dude. This is total Mitsuda. You're right. This is where he starts to embrace on the PS2 more orchestration creativity, and he's getting some of that world music. I don't know what kind of percussion. Like I'm not sure if it's a tabla that I'm hearing or what. Not 100% sure. And I also don't want to just say like, oh, it's, Eastern, because what does that mean? I don't know. I think the vocalizing is using either non-US, non-Western 12 tone notation or microtonal notation. That other music, like Indian music, has this a lot. Like they will have notation to indicate not only some of these embellishes that we hear as embellishes, but also indicate notes between like half steps. They have that built into the notation because it's just, it's a different notation system.
That's interesting.
And that's what it sounds like here. I don't know if that's what he was going for. I don't know if that has to do with anything in the game, but putting all of that sort of Eastern umbrella term, Eastern music on top of a funk bass line is pretty damn cool.
It's really cool. And the synth keys too, towards the middle of the track, around 2 minutes in, where they're like really going in on like that melody. I think what's really cool here, as just somebody who was in percussion, obviously did classical percussion for a while in school, I like the different crashes that they use in this. Obviously the basic bass, but then they're using like one of those crashes that sounds like it's a metal rod slamming against a sheet metal. I love that kind of stuff. It's kind of pleasing to the ears to hear.
Yeah, I can hear the differences in those different cymbal types. I just don't know what the names of any of them are outside of.
Either.
I mean, it sounds to me just like a splash cymbal, but I'm sure I'm wrong.
Yeah, it could be.
I don't know. It's not a China cymbal. We learned what those were when my drum set playing friends brought them into high school and got them banned within 2 days.
Gotta love it.
We've got 2 more games. Sea of Stars. I don't know how much you want to talk about Sea of Stars, Nick. That is the one JRPG that I've written here. Mitsuda assisted in the compositions with Sea of Stars. He didn't do all of them. He only did a handful. The one that I have here that I might put in here, whether or not we sit on this or not, is totally fine, but it's called Triumph Encompassed. This to me sounds so much like his work on Radical Dreamers and like the song Radical Dreamers, the electric guitar that he uses in Chrono Cross. Otherwise, it's pretty unremarkable to me. I listened to a lot of the stuff that he contributed to Sea of Stars, and I don't know, I wasn't wowed by any of it. It's not that it's bad, but nothing really stood out to me as like, oh, we got to talk about this on the show.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I listened to this Triumph Encompass track and I was like, I have no thoughts. I have really no thoughts on this one other than the fact that it's like weird he's using an electric guitar and I don't really hear him using that instrument a lot. But I did listen to some of the Radical Dreamers YouTube like songs that were linked in some of the interviews that you had linked from Shmup, and those were really cool. So it's interesting kind of seeing that comparison there. But yeah, I don't really care about this one that much in Sea of Stars.
Yeah, that's a story of Sea of Stars. High expectations, very middling experience.
Yeah.
But we mentioned Mario Party 1.
Yeah.
And he did. He composed a lot of Mario Party 1, all of Mario Party 1, or at least that's what he's credited for, I should say. He said that he had thrown out a lot of the tracks for them. He was asked in one of these interviews, he was asked about Mario Party and some of the other non-JRPG games he composed. He said, quote, "Interesting stories. Well, I don't really have much to talk about, but for Mario Party, I ended up writing a total of 200 tracks. Only 60 were actually used in the game.
That's crazy.
It was number 1 in terms of the number of compositions rejected."
That's really, really fascinating.
I think I read somewhere that he just kept writing like JRPG music and they kept saying like, that's not what this is, man.
that's so fucking funny to think about, like Yasunori Mitsuda having to go to like the Nintendo headquarters or working with the sound team over at Nintendo, and they're like, what are you doing, dude? Just give us Mario Party music. But no, this is really, really cool. I like this track, the Eternal Star. Yeah, no, I would be curious. I don't know. Maybe he has like a file saved on his computer somewhere of some of the whatever the 140 tracks that didn't make the final cut of Mario Party. Because I'd be really curious if he either used those in some of his later works or if it's just kind of in his back catalog. I'm sure maybe they just rotted in a deleted folder somewhere and never to be seen again.
Yeah, who knows? It would be great to hear some of those, but at that time, I don't know if they were storing things electronically, like if that was the norm. That Eternal Star one is pretty cool. I mean, it is so very clearly a JRPG composer put into like the Mario Land.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love the march too, because the march immediately like brings to mind like the Frogs theme, or it brings to mind different themes from that you're hearing in Chrono Cross as well. It's just it's just something it does feel strictly Mario. Like I don't think I actually ever played the original Mario Party. Like I think my first exposure was to 3, but this is a really interesting track, and I like kind of like the back and forth. It feels like there should be a JRPG party that's putting together, and you're swapping between the mage and the hero class and picking your next move to this music. This is just battle music, and I love it.
There's another one that I put in there too called Battle Canyon (Wario's Board). And it starts with this really nice little bassoon, which is very good, but getting into the actual melody of it after that little introduction, it sounds like it was taken from a JRPG. It sounds Final Fantasy, to be honest with you. This sounds like Final Fantasy IX, almost. This
is great. Yeah, I really like this. There's a lot of different instruments that are going on in this track in Battle Canyon, and again you like the horns that are in the background alongside like the different strings that are happening all at the same time. This is really, really cool. This seems like this is like a town theme.
Yeah, it's cool to see him out of his quote unquote element and doing some of this. I think he also worked on Bomberman 64, the second attack.
One question I have for you, like, again, you might not have an answer, but I'm curious, is like in terms, because I know that Koji Kondo was responsible for most of the Nintendo works of this era. Do you think this would be a situation where, Mitsuda would be composing and then going over to the studio and then like presenting some of his work to Koji Kondo, who would give like that final approval? Or is this kind of just like he'd be working with a sound team and they'd say yes or no to whatever he's throwing at the wall?
I thought that I remembered reading this, so I wanted to do a quick search for it very quickly. It looks like Mitsuda did work with Kenta Nagata and Koji Kondo on Mario Party, but the latter were just not included in the credits.
I see, okay.
And I was wrong before. He co-composed Mario Party 2. The problem with that is that there's no citation in the Super Mario Wiki for that. It's tough to say definitively. It would make sense though, right? Like it would make sense somebody that's not composing for the Mario series to work alongside of Koji Kondo, at the very least for approval.
Right. Yeah, I feel as though that there's probably situations where they're kind of involved together. They probably worked in the same studio together during, these different projects, but this is really, really cool and unique. And I will say that, in terms of a lot of like Koji Kondo's work, that kind of playful nature that is a through line and ever present in a lot of different Nintendo properties is really prevalent here, where I'm listening and it's like still like you're saying, very much that JRPG. We're going from the strings to the piano, and we're interpreting. We're kind of interlaying bass and other horn instruments over here in this track in particular in Battle Canyon. But it's definitely got that playful nature that is very childish and not necessarily what he was known for earlier on. So this is a cool track.
All right, so we've exhausted some of the game music that he's done. Again, there is so much that we left out. That's just the nature of how these things go. We could do a whole series on each composer. But there are some non-game things that he did that I thought would be pretty cool to mention. He has done less non-video game things than Uematsu. Like, Uematsu does a lot more in that department, which is fine. It does look like Mitsuda did a lot of anime.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know. My anime watch history is pretty slim compared to yours. Do you know any of these?
So anything that you've linked here, or
it looks like he did a lot for Inazuma 11 is one of them. Black Butler is another.
Oh, I love Black Butler's music. That makes perfect sense now. No, Black Butler is a great anime. I'm not familiar with Inazuma at all. I see a lot of that. So he was doing Yokai Watch, I've heard through friends, is really good. I will also say that Delicious in Dungeon is a newer anime that it's actually incredible. Really, really well done. And it looks like he composed that with Shunsuke Tsuchiya. So that's really, really interesting. But no, yeah, I love Black Butler. So his work on that, on those projects are really interesting. It looks like these might be, I can't tell if these are different seasons. Yeah, these are seasons of the Black Butler series, and I'm not 100% well versed in all of it, but it's a pretty good anime. It's really interesting.
I'm looking at the ones that are linked here are titled Book of Circus and Book of Murder for Black Butler, and just hovering over the link gives you a little a visual. This is the kind of manga I would have been a little bastard for in middle school. I would have pestered my family to take me to Barnes & Noble and buy this.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. Black Butler is an interesting story about this kid. He makes a deal with a demon to give the demon his heart. In exchange for the power that the demon can give him, and the demon kind of makes this agreement with him, but the demon also in exchange becomes his butler. And it's it takes place in London. I can't remember. It's probably 17th century or 18th century London. It's really, really fascinating series that's full of a lot of darker themes. But yeah, really, really, really solid work. So this is interesting that he actually composed for them.
So these two that I do have linked here that I'm probably going to put music for into the episode. One is a work by Masato Kato titled Kirite. And it is an original story by Kato with music by Mitsuda, and it also uses a series of paintings as well. You can hear a lot of Mitsuda in this, like the guitar and the bass especially, but he adds in more rock elements as well, and a lot of world music too, a lot more ambient whistles and flutes and soundscapes too. I don't think the full thing is on YouTube though. There's one hit for it and it's 12 minutes or so long, and I think it's just a sort of sampling of each section of the work.
Okay.
So that's my only experience with it are those samplings, but it sounds very cool. There was apparently an English translation of this fully done back in 2022 or something.
Is this an audiobook or a graph? What is this? It's not a movie, is it?
No, I think it's just a story with music, and they set paintings to it as well. It might be live performance art. It might be a stage production. I'm not 100% sure. I just know that it is an original story by Masato Kato with music by Mitsuda.
This is really, really great. Listening to this actual soundtrack, there is a lot of expressiveness, and I mean, again, bass being the front and center. being something that's like, it feels like it's driving it forward. There's the guitars and basses going forward here. There's world music instruments that are interpreted. There's female vocalizations that are happening later on as you go through. This is a really, really fascinating and complex work. Highly recommend to anybody that's interested in kind of listening to the full thing.
I saw a few comments online of folks saying that it was their favorite Mitsuda work, which, I mean, one, that's a bold claim, but two, I feel like if somebody is saying that's their favorite Mitsuda work, something that quote unquote obscure with gamers, they're probably going to be very familiar with the catalog, you know? So their opinion should probably hold some weight. And this last one, well, I've announced them all so far, so I'll let you announce this last one. What's this last one titled?
So I cannot pronounce this one. Sinuinint.
Yeah, I can't either. It is spelled AN space CINNIU with an accent over it INT. Sinuint. I don't know. On Sinuint. This is a straight up Celtic album. He wanted to compose a Celtic album that he described as dense, that is his word, versus the, quote, easy to listen to pop song with Celtic essence, end quote, that he described the music, that's how he described the music in Xenogears. So that's what he didn't want to do.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so he was describing his own music. I thought maybe he was talking about Enya or something like that. So that's fun.
No, because folks like the Xenogears music that has that Celtic influence, and you know, that's in one of these interviews that I've linked. He said like, yeah, that's just a pop song with a little bit of Celtic influence. But here he was like, no, I want to do an honest to goodness Celtic album. And you know, some of it definitely sounds that way. Some of it does sound like video game music. There is one track, I think I have translated these properly. There is one track titled Nemuri no Nakade, which I think is in the midst of sleep, that just sounds like Chrono Cross. Like straight up, it sounds like it could be from Chrono Cross. It's playing right now. You hear it.
Yeah.
And then there's another one. Again, I think I translated this properly. Tachi Hadakaru Teki, which is the enemy in my way. The enemy standing in my way. That, I mean, it sounds like Mitsuda just at his best video game music wise, to me.
I can agree with you there.
I don't say that as a dig. It sounds great.
Yeah. All of these tracks are actually fantastic. Specifically, the on Sinuant track I think is really, really, really nice. This is beautiful. It's amazing to see, obviously, like the evolution in his work, going from, you know, where you're talking about like it's video game music. It can be very simplistic based off of the limitations of the hardware. Whereas when we get to something like this, where he is composing something that is just strictly like him working with in any way that he wants. He has full creative liberty and creative control on how to do this. This is fantastic.
Let's see here. When was this released? This was released in 2001. On Christmas, it looks like. Christmas 2001.
Hey, what a treat for folks back then. Some real Mitsuda heads back in 2001.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it.
There are at least hundreds of us.
Yes. Yeah, so that's interesting. That would have been before Xenosaga then, I'm pretty sure. Before he got into like the big orchestration, working with the London Phil. That's the big thing with Xenosaga, is that he worked with the London Philharmonic, which is incredible. That's one of the reasons that soundtrack is so phenomenal. In some ways, that soundtrack is his most developed work, his best work in some ways, I think.
Right.
It's extraordinary, at least in terms of the recording.
Yeah, I remember, listening or reading in the interview, he said that working with the London Philharmonic was great because, there are these all of these fantastic musicians who care about music, and he's like, it's probably one of the scariest times that he ever did, because he's like, why would someone like me be able to work with them? It was really funny. It's such a great sense of humor about himself and his work, but deservedly so. I think you and I discussed this when we were talking about Xenosaga, and the truth is, in the classical music community, and as in terms of the composition community and the folks who do music professionally like that, they don't just let anyone come in and work with the London Phil. So it's good stuff.
Yes, indeedy dandy. It is very, very good stuff. Well, we could be here all day if we wanted to go through all of the good stuff Mitsuda has done. As we said up top, this wasn't meant to be, nor could it ever be that. We just don't have enough time. What we do hope today was a fun look at Mitsuda's music and into why we think it is worth checking out, what makes it special to us compared to other composers and other music. And hopefully it has given you the itch to check out some of his work as well. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around, and thank you, Nick, for coming to join me. Have we convinced you now to play through the rest of Chrono Trigger and get into Chrono Cross?
Man, you have done more than convince me. I am not only ready to go through those games, I'm excited to do it now. So, sorry, Baldur's Gate 3, you're going to have to take a backseat. I got more JRPGs to play.
Oh, that's been on my backseat for, I think I bought that the 2 days after it released, and it has never been played.
0 hours played on Steam. You gotta love it. But again, thank you, Rick, for having me here. This has been fantastic. Always enjoyable to join you on Pixel Project Radio, and I hope that everyone enjoyed this as much as I did.
Absolutely, buddy. The pleasure is all mine. What has been going on over at Friday Night Gamecast? Tell the listeners it's been a little bit of time since you have extolled the great virtues of your show. What's been going on over on Friday Night Gamecast? What have you been talking about lately?
Nothing crazy going on at Friday Night Gamecast. We have been plodding along slowly but surely. Will in my time has become limited as of late, as, life happens to us, and, things... we just have to juggle more things. I blame Crimson Desert for just really putting a damper on all of our output production. Will, he can take accountability for that. So everyone go, 3, 2, 1, boo Will right now over in the audience there. But there's a lot of cool stuff that's going on the Friday Night Gamecast. We're currently in our 4th season, and our most recent episode, we had really good now friends of the show and new friends to join our podcast to talk about Slay the Spire, one of the most beloved rogue-like deck builders ever made, and probably arguably the best roguelike deck builder made. I'm playing the second one right now. But Claire and Kanisha from Date With Us joined us, and we had a really, really fun episode. There's a thing that I tried. I did a little bit of an icebreaker game at the beginning of the show. So if anybody's interested in, we got a little goofy with it up front, but that was a really, really good time. A lot of other video game reviews that you can find over on our podcast. We are a video game review podcast, but we did talk about, really relevant voice actors earlier as well. And I think one of my favorite reviews that I think I've ever done up to this point, we reviewed Resident Evil Requiem. So Will and I focus on a little bit of modern games. Sometimes we take a dip into the backlog, a dip into some retro works, but it's always a good time over there. So yeah, please check us out if you got the chance. Friday Night Gamecast.
Absolutely. That is one of the shows that I can wholeheartedly recommend. It's a great time. Will and Nick are good fellas. Nick and Will and Nick, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
Great guys. A lot of fun. What's that?
We can't wait to have you back on, Rick. We can't wait. We're going to lock in, and we're going to get you back on to the show later this year. It's going to be great.
Well, I would love to come back. I am always loving seeing what you fellas are up to. And you folks at home can check them out by looking in the episode description. Among all of the interview links, the playlist links, all of that stuff, you can find links to Friday Night Gamecast, where you can listen to them, where you can find them on social media, etc. I'll cut this if the answer is no, but is your Discord public as well?
It is public. Please, everyone, come join the Discord. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you can. You can absolutely do that. The caveat, though, is I'm going to make the link special that you also have to join ours if you want to join theirs.
Exactly.
Have to do both.
Don't come in here if you're not in PPR as well. You got to be in both.
Got to do both. Have to. And then, of course, speaking of that, you can find our links in there as well. Links to the Discord, as we said, links to the social media, the Patreon if you're feeling extra generous. You can find all of that fun stuff. The Patreon this month is talking about another very, very good JRPG with really, really good music, Grandia, from back in the Sega Saturn PS1 days. That's a lot of fun. You can find everything there in the description, especially check out Mitsuda's music. A lot of it is incredibly good and fun to listen to. So, Nick, thank you again. Listeners, thank you for sticking around. Thank you all to one and all. I think with all the thanks out of the way, that's going to be about all. So I am Rick. I am your host as always. Thanks for tuning in once again. We're going to sign off for now, and we'll catch you next time. Take care, everyone.